The message came on a Tuesday. All screens on Earth showed the same face: gray skin, 4 yellow eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. People of Earth, we are the Vex. We come in peace and wish to share knowledge with you. Captain James Reed stood on the bridge of the UES Thunderbolt, Earth's largest defense ship, and watched the message with narrowed eyes. "I don't trust them," he said to his second-in-command, Jack Miller. Miller nodded. "Something feels off. Alert all ships. Keep weapons ready but hidden," Reed ordered. Down on Earth, the world leaders gathered in New York to meet the Vex ambassador. Major Lisa Wilson walked around the meeting room, checking security one last time. As the military advisor to the Earth Council, she felt responsible for everyone's safety. "Major, do you think we can trust these aliens?" asked Council Leader Thomas Green. Wilson looked at the tall windows. "Not fully, sir. I've placed snipers on all buildings around us, just in case." "Good thinking, but let's hope we don't need them," Green said with a smile. 3 days later, a small Vex ship landed in Central Park. Out came Ambassador Mord, tall and thin with those same 4 yellow eyes that had been on every screen. 10 guards followed him. "We bring gifts and knowledge," Mord said, his voice deep and smooth. "The Vex wish to learn from humans and teach you about the stars." The meetings went on for a week. The Vex seemed friendly. They shared some simple technology, better solar panels, new medicines. People began to trust them. But Captain Reed, watching from orbit, saw strange things. Small Vex ships would break away from their main fleet and disappear behind the moon, only to return hours later. "They're scanning us," Reed told his crew, "mapping our defenses." He sent his findings to Major Wilson, who brought them to Council Leader Green. "Captain Reed may be right," she said. "The Vex ships are moving in patterns that suggest they're studying our weaknesses." Green frowned. "But they've been so helpful. They're fixing our climate problems with their technology." "Sir, I think it's a trap," Wilson insisted. "We can't act hostile based on suspicion," Green decided, "but double the guards at all meetings." On the 10th day, the Vex invited Earth's leaders to a special ceremony on their main ship. They called it a friendship binding. 50 world leaders would attend. Reed's warnings grew stronger. Don't let them go. But the council ignored him. The ceremony would happen. Major Wilson insisted on heavy security. She placed 20 soldiers on the Vex ship and kept a rescue team ready. The day came. The world watched as humans and Vex gathered on the alien ship that hovered over New York. Ambassador Mord stood before the crowd. "Today marks the beginning of a great friendship between our peoples," he said. At that exact moment, Captain Reed saw movement. The hidden Vex ships behind the moon were moving, all at once, heading toward Earth. "It's a trap," Reed shouted into his comm. "All ships, battle stations. Major Wilson, get our people out of there now." On the Vex ship, Wilson's comm crackled with Reed's warning. She looked at Mord and saw his 4 eyes blink sideways. A smile spread across his face, showing those sharp teeth. "Now," Mord said quietly. The Vex guards pulled out weapons. Wilson reacted instantly. "Protect the council," she shouted, drawing her gun and firing at the nearest Vex. Chaos erupted. The Vex ship sealed its doors. Outside, the sky filled with hundreds of Vex warships appearing from behind the moon. Captain Reed ordered the Earth Defense Fleet to attack, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Vex ships fired strange purple beams that cut through Earth's best shields like paper. "They studied us," Reed realized. "They know exactly how to beat our defenses." On the Vex ship, Major Wilson fought her way through aliens twice her size. She reached Council Leader Green, who was hiding behind a fallen table. "We need to get to the escape pods," she said, helping him up. "How could we have been so blind?" Green asked, his face pale with shock. Later, Wilson said, "Move now or die here." They ran through the ship, gathering other survivors. 20 humans out of 50 made it to the escape pods. Wilson shoved them in and set the coordinates for a military base in the mountains. As their pod shot away from the Vex ship, they saw New York burning below them. More Vex ships appeared in the sky above every major city on Earth. In orbit, the Thunderbolt took heavy damage. A Vex beam cut through the ship's left side, killing 30 crew members instantly. "We can't win this," Miller told Reed as the bridge filled with smoke. Reed wanted to keep fighting, but he knew Miller was right. All Earth ships retreat and scatter. Hide where you can. This is not surrender. This is survival. The Thunderbolt limped away from Earth, its engines barely working. Reed watched on the screens as the Vex took control of his home planet in less than 6 hours. Major Wilson's escape pod landed in the Rocky Mountains. She helped the survivors into the hidden base and then went to the communication room. "Captain Reed, do you copy?" she called. After long minutes of static, his voice came through, weak and broken. "I'm here, Major. We failed." "No," she said firmly. "We survived. And while we survive, Earth is not defeated." On all screens across the planet, Ambassador Mord appeared again, no longer pretending to be friendly. "People of Earth, you are now under Vex control. Your leaders are dead. Your military is destroyed. Resistance means death. The Vex Empire claims this world." In the mountain base, Wilson watched the broadcast with the survivors. In space, Reed and his remaining crew saw it too. "They think they've won," Reed said quietly. "They're wrong," Wilson answered through the crackling comm. "This is just the beginning." Far from Earth, the damaged Thunderbolt disappeared into the darkness of the asteroid belt. Its captain made a promise to himself and his crew. The Vex thought the war was over. They would soon learn it had only just begun. 6 months passed. Earth looked different now. Vex buildings rose like sharp teeth from the ruins of human cities. Their ships filled the skies. Their soldiers walked the streets. In what was once New York, Supreme General Korv stood at the window of his tower, looking down at the humans working below. They moved heavy carts filled with dirt and rocks from deep mining pits. "The work goes too slowly," Korb said to Ambassador Mord. "Humans are weak, but there are many of them," Mord replied. "The core metals will be ours soon enough." The Emperor grows impatient. "We must have the metals within 3 months." Mord bowed his head. "It will be done." Deep underground, far below the Vex patrols, Major Lisa Wilson moved through a network of old subway tunnels and sewers. Her uniform was dirty and torn now, but the gun at her hip still shone. She reached a heavy metal door and knocked 3 times, paused, then knocked twice more. The door opened. Inside, 50 people looked up from their work. Some cleaned weapons. Others packed food into bags. A man with a broken arm drew maps on the wall. "Any word from the other groups?" Wilson asked a young woman named Helen. Group 3 found more survivors in Boston. Group 7 lost 5 people in a Vex raid. Wilson nodded, her face grim. "And our special project?" Helen led her to the back of the room where a thin man with glasses worked on a strange device. "Tom has something to show you." Tom held up the device. It looked like a mix between a radio and a phone. "I finally got it working. It can catch Vex communications and they can't detect it." Wilson took the device. "Can you make more?" "With the right parts, yes." "Good. What have you learned so far?" Tom pushed his glasses up. "They're digging all over the planet, looking for metals deep in the Earth's core, something they call Vorium and Nexate." "What for?" "I don't know yet, but they're in a hurry." Wilson thought for a moment. "Keep listening. Find out everything you can." In the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, the UES Thunderbolt hid inside a hollow rock. The ship still showed battle damage, but it could fly. Captain Reed had spent months gathering other survivors, small research ships, mining vessels, anything that escaped the Vex attack. Reed stood in what they called the War Room, actually just the Thunderbolt's old cafeteria. Maps and pictures of Earth covered the walls. 20 ship captains sat around tables made from storage boxes. The mining ships found more metal for us, Reed said. Enough to fix 2 more weapon systems. An old mining captain named Dias spoke up. My crew is tired of hiding. When do we fight back? When we can win, Reed answered firmly. Right now, attacking would be suicide. So we just hide forever? Another captain asked. Reed pointed to a man standing quietly in the corner. Tom Hayes has an idea that might help us. Hayes stepped forward. He was an engineer, his hands always dirty with grease and metal dust. I've been studying the mining equipment. With some changes, I think we can turn the gravity drills into weapons. What kind of weapons? Diaz asked. The drills create focused gravity fields to break up asteroids. If I reverse the field, we could create a gravity weapon that pulls Vex ships apart. The room went quiet. Then Diaz smiled. I like this man. Reed nodded. Hayes needs help. Anyone with engineering skills, work with him. The rest of us will continue gathering supplies and information. As the meeting ended, Reed's communication officer ran in. Captain, we picked up a signal from Earth. Reed rushed to the bridge. A weak voice came through the static. Resistance Group 7, Major Wilson, seeking any Earth forces. Reed grabbed the radio. This is Captain Reed of the UES Thunderbolt. We hear you. More static then. Captain, you're alive. Reed recognized the voice. Major Wilson. Good to hear you're not dead. Wilson's laugh came through the static. Same to you. We have a growing resistance here. Over 2,000 people in 12 groups. What's your situation? Bad but not hopeless. The Vex are digging for something. We've been watching them and stealing their tech when we can. Hayes stepped closer to the radio. Major, this is Engineer Hayes. What kind of tech have you found? Communication devices, some weapons. One of our people, Tom, has created a device that lets us listen to their transmissions. Hayes looked excited. Ask about their communication systems. How do they work? The conversation went on for hours. When it finally ended, Reed felt something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. Hayes turned to him. Captain, the Vex have a weakness. Their communication system uses sound waves at specific frequencies. How does that help us? If we can create the right counter frequencies, we could disrupt their entire network. Hayes smiled. And guess what Earth has that could create massive sound disruptions? Reed thought for a moment, then understood. Thunderstorms. Exactly. Earth's weather control satellites are still in orbit. If Major Wilson's people can access the control stations on the ground. Reed looked at the map of Earth on the wall. For the first time in 6 months, he allowed himself to smile. Tell me more about these gravity weapons. Back on Earth, Wilson received a message from her team watching the Vex command center. The Vex were increasing work shifts. More humans were being forced into the mines. The digging was getting deeper. In her underground base, Wilson gathered her leaders. Whatever they're looking for, they're getting desperate to find it. That makes them careless. She showed them a rough map of Vex patrol routes. They're so focused on the mines that they've reduced security here, and here. We can use these gaps to move more people and supplies. A resistance fighter raised her hand. We found something strange. The Vex seem uncomfortable during thunderstorms. They reduced patrols and stay inside their buildings. Wilson remembered her conversation with Reed and Hayes. That's very interesting. Start tracking weather patterns. I want to know when and where every storm hits. As the meeting ended, Wilson looked at a faded picture of Earth taken from space. Somewhere up there, Reed and the Thunderbolt were planning something. Down here, her resistance was growing stronger. The Vex thought they had won. They were wrong. In his tower, Supreme General Korv felt uneasy. Reports of small attacks and missing patrols were increasing. But humans were weak. They could not possibly be a threat now. He pushed the feeling aside and focused on the mining operation. The Emperor needed those metals. Nothing else mattered. 1 month later, Captain Reeves stood before a table in the asteroid base. A hologram of Earth rotated slowly above it. 12 small lights blinked on different parts of the planet, the locations of Major Wilson's resistance groups. "It's time," Reed said to the gathered captains and crew. "We've hidden long enough." Engineer Hayes stepped forward. He looked tired but excited. "The gravity weapons are ready. We've installed them on 6 mining ships and tested them on asteroids. They work even better than I hoped." Reed nodded. "And our communication with Major Wilson? Solid and secure," said the communications officer. "Her people have reached 3 of the weather control stations." Reed touched the hologram, zooming in on a building in what was once Geneva, Switzerland. "This is the main VEX command center. According to Wilson's spies, Supreme General Korv directs all operations from here." He looked around the room. "We now have a plan. We call it Operation Thunder." On Earth, Major Wilson moved carefully through the ruins of an old weather research station. 5 resistance fighters followed her. They wore stolen VEX worker uniforms and carried bags of tools to look like a repair crew. "The control room is 2 floors down," Wilson whispered. "Tom, can you make it work?" Tom, the thin man with glasses, nodded. "If the main systems are intact, yes. I'll need 20 minutes. They moved down the dark stairwell. The building had been abandoned after the invasion, the VEX not understanding its importance. That was their mistake. They'd reached the control room. Dead screens lined the walls. Dust covered everything. "Stand guard," Wilson ordered the others. "Tom, do your magic." Tom opened his bag and pulled out cables and a power unit. He connected them to the main console and began typing. Slowly, the screens flickered to life. "I'm in," he said after 15 minutes. "Connecting to the satellite network now." Wilson looked over his shoulder. "Can you control them?" "Yes." The VEX never bothered to disable the system. Tom smiled. "They don't understand Earth's weather. They don't know what we can do with these satellites." Wilson touched her radio. "Reed, this is Wilson. Weather Station 3 is operational. We now have control of 40% of the network." Reed's voice came through clearly. "Excellent. My team reports stations 1 and 5 are also online. That gives us coverage over most of the northern hemisphere. When do we start?" 3 days. We need time to position our ships." "Can your people plant the disruptors?" Wilson looked at a map on one of the screens. "Yes. Teams are moving into position now. The VEX are focused on their mining operation and have reduced patrols in key areas." "Good. In 3 days, we show them that humans don't surrender so easily." In his tower, Supreme General Korv received bad news. The mining had hit unexpected problems. The humans were working too slowly, even with increased punishment. And now there were reports of missing patrols and equipment. "Find the problems and fix them," he ordered his commanders. "The Emperor expects results." Ambassador Mord entered Korv's office. "General, I've observed something strange. The human workers become excited when there are storms. They whisper to each other. They look at the sky." Korv dismissed this with a wave. "They are primitive creatures who fear natural events. Focus on the mining." "There is something else," Mord insisted. "Our long-range scanners detected movement in the asteroid belt. It could be nothing, but the human ships were destroyed," Korv said firmly. "Any survivors would have run out of supplies months ago." Mord bowed and left, but he felt uneasy. Humans had surprised them before with their adaptability. Could they be planning something? On the UES Thunderbolt, Reed addressed his crew and the other ship captains. The ship's cafeteria was packed. People stood shoulder to shoulder, waiting to hear his words. "For 8 months, we've hidden and survived," Reed began. "We've watched our home be taken by invaders who thought we were defeated, but they were wrong." He pointed to a map of the solar system. "The VEX believe they've won because they have bigger ships and stronger weapons. They don't understand what makes humans different from other species they've conquered." Reed's voice grew stronger. We don't give up. We adapt. We find new ways to fight. And most importantly, we work together. He explained the plan. The weather satellites would create massive storm systems over key VEX installations. The storms would mask the activation of sound disruptors that Wilson's teams had planted. These disruptors would create frequencies that would jam VEX communications. While they're confused and isolated, Wilson's resistance will strike from below, and will attack from above. Reed continued. Our mining ships may not look like much, but thanks to Engineer Hayes, they now have weapons the VEX have never seen before. A mining captain named Diaz stood up. My crew is ready to show these four-eyed monsters what happens when you mess with humans. Cheers filled the room. Reed waited for them to quiet down. This won't be easy, he warned. We'll be outnumbered and outgunned, but we have surprise on our side, and we have something the VEX don't understand. Earth itself. Our planet's weather will be our ally. He looked around the room, meeting the eyes of his people. 3 days from now, we take back our home. Get ready. Check your ships, check your weapons, and say your prayers if you have them. As the meeting ended, Hayes approached Reed. Captain, there's something you should know. The gravity weapons will only work at close range. Your ship will need to get very near the VEX command vessels. Reed nodded. I understand the risk. There's more, Hayes said quietly. Based on what Wilson's spies have learned, the VEX are digging for metals to build some kind of super weapon. If we don't stop them now, we will, Reed said firmly. One way or another, this ends in 3 days. Across Earth, resistance fighters moved silently through ruins and forests, planting small devices near VEX communication towers. In the old weather stations, technicians prepared to take control of the satellites. In space, the small fleet of human ships began moving slowly toward Earth, using asteroids and space debris for cover. In his tower, Supreme General Korv felt a strange pressure in the air. He looked out at the clear sky and wondered why he felt as if a storm was coming. 3 days. The countdown to Operation Thunder had begun. The day arrived. Dark clouds gathered over Earth. In weather stations around the planet, resistance members worked at control panels, guiding the satellites that pushed the storm systems together. Major Wilson stood in the Swiss Alps, looking down at the VEX command center in Geneva. Rain had already started falling. Lightning flashed in the distance. All teams report ready, Helen said, checking her radio. Wilson nodded. Tell them to wait for the thunder. When they hear it, activate the disruptors. In space, Captain Reed's small fleet approached Earth from the dark side, away from the VEX patrol ships. The UES Thunderbolt led 12 vessels, 3 damaged military ships and 9 converted mining craft. VEX ships are changing position, reported Miller, now Reed's tactical officer. The storm is making them nervous. Reed smiled. Good. They don't understand that storms on Earth are natural. They think something strange is happening. He opened a channel to all ships. Stay on course. When the thunder starts, move to attack positions. In his tower, Supreme General Korv watched the growing storm with 4 worried eyes. Something about this weather felt wrong. Too organized, too purposeful. Check all security systems, he ordered his commanders. And send a message to all outposts. Full alert. A VEX officer tried to send the message, but his screen showed only static. Sir, communications are experiencing interference. What kind of interference? Korv demanded. Unknown. It started with the storm. Korv felt a chill. Could the humans be using their own planet's weather against the VEX? No, that was impossible. Humans were simple creatures. The first massive thunderclap shook the tower. The sound rolled across the landscape, echoing off mountains and buildings. It was the signal. In hiding places around the world, resistance fighters activated the sound disruptors. The devices looked simple, just metal boxes with antennas, but inside they held technology designed by Tom. using parts stolen from Vex equipment. The disruptors sent out waves that humans couldn't hear, but that matched exactly the frequencies used by Vex communications. In Geneva, Corb's screens went blank. His officers shouted in confusion. "What is happening?" Corv roared. "All communications are down," an officer reported. "We can't reach any outposts or ships." Another thunderclap, louder than the first, shook the building. Outside the tower, 50 resistance fighters led by Wilson moved through the rain. They wore dark clothes and carried weapons, some human, some stolen from Vex. They reached the lower entrance where 2 Vex guards stood confused by their dead communication devices. Wilson gave the signal. 2 resistance snipers fired. The guards fell. "Move in," Wilson ordered. "Remember the plan. Get to the control room and shut down their defense grid." In space, Reed saw the lightning flashing across Earth's surface. The storm covered most of Europe now, exactly as planned. "All ships, attack pattern Alpha," he commanded. "Mining vessels target the Vex patrol ships. Military vessels, follow me to the main Vex cruiser." The human fleet broke formation. The mining ships, bulky and slow-looking, moved toward the smaller Vex patrol vessels. But they weren't as slow as they appeared. Hayes had not only added gravity weapons, but had also improved their engines. A Vex patrol ship noticed the approaching mining vessel too late. The mining ship fired its gravity weapon, not a beam or a missile, but a focused field of energy that warped space itself. The patrol ship's hull bent inward, metal screaming as it folded like paper. Across Earth's orbit, the scene repeated. Mining ships attacked Vex vessels, using weapons the aliens had never seen before. The Vex tried to fight back, but without communications, they couldn't coordinate. Each ship fought alone. The Thunderbolt and 2 other military vessels headed straight for the massive Vex cruiser that served as their orbital command center. The cruiser was 3 times the size of the Thunderbolt, with weapons that could destroy Reed's ship with one hit, if they saw him coming. But the storm interfered with the cruiser's sensors. By the time they detected the approaching human ships, Reed was already in firing range. "Fire gravity weapons," Reed ordered. The Thunderbolt fired. The gravity weapon couldn't crush a ship as large as the cruiser, but it could damage specific parts. Reed had aimed for the cruiser's main weapon systems. Metal twisted and bent, rendering the weapons useless. "Direct hit," Miller reported. "Their main guns are down." Reed nodded. "Now for the hard part. Prepare boarding teams." Inside the Vex command tower in Geneva, Wilson's team fought their way up level by level. The Vex soldiers were confused without communications, but they were still dangerous. 3 resistance fighters fell in the first minutes of the attack. Wilson led her team toward the central control room. According to their intelligence, that room controlled not just the tower, but the link to the Vex ships in orbit. 10 more meters, Helen said, checking the map they had stolen months ago. A group of Vex soldiers appeared around the corner. Wilson fired her weapon, a modified Vex gun that Tom had improved. The shot hit the lead soldier, sending him flying backward into his companions. "Now," Wilson shouted. Her team threw small devices down the hallway. The devices activated, creating a high-pitched sound that made the Vex soldiers drop their weapons and cover their ear holes. "Move," Wilson ordered. Her team rushed forward, taking down the disabled Vex soldiers. They reached the control room door. It was sealed, but Tom had prepared for this. He attached a device to the door's control panel. The door slid open. Inside, Supreme General Corv stood surrounded by his commanders. His 4 yellow eyes widened at the sight of the humans. "Impossible," he said. Wilson aimed her weapon at him. Surprise. In orbit, Reed's boarding teams entered the Vex cruiser. The alien crew fought back, but they were disorganized. Hayes led one team, heading for the engine room. "Plant the charges here," Hayes told his team, pointing to key parts of the Vex engine. "When these blow, the whole power system will fail." On the bridge of the Thunderbolt, Reed received reports from around the world. Resistance groups had attacked Vex installations in New York, Tokyo, London, and a dozen other cities. The surprise was complete. "Sir," Miller called out, "look at this." On the main screen, Reed saw something amazing. Humans were rising up everywhere. Not just resistance fighters, but ordinary people who had been forced to work in Vex mines and factories. They were attacking their guards, using tools as weapons. The Vex thought they had broken humanity's spirit. They were wrong. Another massive thunderclap rolled across the Earth, so loud it could be heard even in space through the radio transmissions. It was the sound of humanity fighting back. In the Vex Command Center in Geneva, Major Wilson faced Supreme General Corv. Rain pounded against the windows. Lightning flashed, followed by another deep roll of thunder. "You have lost," Wilson told the Vex leader. "Your communications are down. Your ships are under attack. Your forces around the world are being defeated." Corv's 4 yellow eyes narrowed. "Impossible. You are just simple humans." "That was your mistake," Wilson said. "You thought we were simple. You didn't understand what makes us strong." Her team secured the room, disarming the Vex officers and taking control of the systems. Tom rushed to the main control panel. "I can access their network from here," he said excitedly. "I can send a message to all their forces." Outside, the storm grew stronger. The plan was working even better than expected. The weather satellites had created the perfect storm system, powerful enough to mask their operations but controlled enough to avoid harming civilian areas. In orbit, the battle turned in humanity's favor. The 6 mining ships had destroyed 12 Vex patrol vessels, using their gravity weapons. Reed's Thunderbolt and the other military ships had disabled the main Vex cruiser. Reed led a team onto the cruiser's bridge. The Vex captain tried to fight, but was quickly overpowered. "Secure the ship," Reed ordered his team. "Hayes, what's your status?" Hayes' voice came through the radio. "We've taken the engine room. The ship is ours, Captain." Reed looked out the cruiser's viewport. Earth spun below, partially covered by massive storm clouds. Lightning flashed across continents. It was beautiful and terrible at the same time. "Wilson, do you copy?" Reed called. After a moment, her voice came through. "I copy. Reed, we've taken the command center. Corv is our prisoner." "Excellent. Can you access their main communication system?" "Tom is working on it now. We're going to broadcast to all Vex forces." Reed smiled. "Tell them they made a big mistake when they attacked Earth." In cities around the world, the battle raged. Vex soldiers, confused without orders from their commanders, fought to maintain control. But they faced not just resistance fighters, but ordinary humans who had reached their breaking point. In New York, factory workers used their tools against Vex guards. In Tokyo, a group of teenagers who had been forced to repair Vex vehicles now used those same vehicles as weapons. In London, miners emerged from the deep pits carrying improvised explosives. The Vex had not expected this level of coordination from a species they thought they had conquered. They had not understood that humans would never truly accept defeat, that they would always look for a way to fight back. And they had not understood Earth itself, its weather, its sounds, its power. In the Geneva Command Center, Tom finished his work on the communication system. "I'm in. We can broadcast to all Vex ships and bases." Wilson nodded. "Do it." Tom activated the system. Screens lit up around the room, showing Vex bases and ships all over Earth and in orbit. Wilson stepped forward. "Attention all Vex forces. Your command structure has been disabled. Your leader, Supreme General Corv, is our prisoner. Your main fleet is under our control." She paused as another crack of thunder shook the building. "But that's not the worst news for you. We've discovered what you really came for. You're not here to conquer Earth. You're here to strip it of core metals for your Empire's weapon program. You've been lying to your own soldiers." This was a gamble. Based on the fragments of information they had gathered from Vex communications, Wilson believed many of the Vex soldiers didn't know the true purpose of the invasion. Corv lunged forward. Silence. Do not listen to this human. Wilson's team held him back. The truth hurts, doesn't it, General? Your soldiers think they're here for glory and conquest, but they're just mining equipment for your emperor. On screens around the room, they could see confusion spreading among Vex forces. Officers tried to maintain control, but ordinary Vex soldiers began lowering their weapons. In the Vex cruiser, Reed watched the broadcast. It's working, he told Hayes. Look at the reactions. On several screens, they could see Vex soldiers turning against their officers. Not all of them. Many remained loyal, but enough to create chaos in the Vex ranks. Send word to all human forces, Reed ordered. Press the advantage while they're confused. The next few hours were chaotic. Across Earth, battles raged between loyal Vex forces and the combined human resistance. But the tide had turned. Without central command, without communication, and with many of their own soldiers in revolt, the Vex began to retreat. By nightfall, the storms had passed. The skies cleared over Geneva. Wilson stood on the balcony of the command tower, looking out at a city partially in ruins, but now free of Vex control. Her radio crackled. Major, this is Reed. I'm landing at the Geneva airfield in 20 minutes. I'm bringing a special guest. Half an hour later, Wilson watched as the Thunderbolt's shuttle landed. Reed emerged, followed by his crew and a bound Supreme General Corv. The two human leaders faced each other. 8 months of hiding, planning, and fighting had changed them both. They were thinner, harder, their eyes reflecting all they had seen and done. Reed held out his hand. Wilson took it. We did it, Reed said simply. Not completely, Wilson replied. There are still Vex forces in some areas, and the damage to Earth will be repaired, Reed finished. Humans are good at rebuilding. They walked together to where Corv waited under guard. The Vex general looked smaller somehow, his arrogance gone. You should have killed me, Corv said. Reed shook his head. That's not how we work. You'll live to see your defeat, to see humans recover and rebuild, to understand the mistake you made in thinking we were easy to conquer. 3 days later, the remaining Vex ships left Earth's orbit. They abandoned their equipment, their mining operations, and their wounded. The Vex Empire had decided Earth was not worth the cost of continued fighting. In what had once been the United Nations building in New York, now half destroyed but still standing, Reed and Wilson met with leaders from around the world. Some were former government officials, others resistance leaders who had emerged during the occupation. We've won our freedom, Reed told the gathering. But we have much work ahead. The Vex will return someday, and there may be other threats out there. Wilson stepped forward. We need to be ready. We have Vex technology now. We can learn from it, improve our defenses. Next time, Earth will not be caught by surprise. The meeting continued late into the night as they made plans for rebuilding. When it finally ended, Reed and Wilson walked outside. The night was clear, stars bright above them. Do you hear that? Reed asked suddenly. Wilson listened. I don't hear anything. Exactly, Reed smiled. No more thunder. But they'll remember it. The Vex will tell stories about the day they thought they had won, until they heard the war thunder. In deep space, the retreating Vex fleet transmitted reports to their empire. Their communications included warnings about Earth and its defenders. They told of storms that seemed to fight for the humans, of thunder that signaled their doom. From that day forward, in Vex communication channels, the sound of thunder became a symbol of fear, a reminder of the planet they had failed to conquer, and the species that had taught them the meaning of resistance.